Hi there, how are you?
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
Good. Looks like you're in a far more ideal setting than I am.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, I'm right next to the vineyard, next to the winery facility here. Yeah,
Fantastic. Looks like a beautiful day.
it is. Yeah, it is. It's actually a nice morning. I'm very sorry about canceling yesterday. That
No
was
problem.
unforeseen. But Courtney, you and I have met, right? I
You look
You
very
were up
familiar,
here.
so I'm sure. Yes, I was there last summer.
Okay, that's right. That's right.
Awesome.
Cool.
Well, thanks for joining me today. I wish I could be there with you instead of
Yeah.
in this computer screen. Uh,
No, no, not at all.
but as you know, due to 2020 circumstances, we're doing
Yeah.
virtual visits instead of in-person visits this year.
Yeah.
And we're talking about Wiemer and Standing Stone today, two of my favorite properties. So I'm pumped to talk to you.
Yeah, that's great. It's funny that we had little mix up yesterday, but it was kind of the epitome of
Yeah.
slow food. And slow wine. We were bottling a project that we've been working on for almost 10 years um, with new varieties. And so we bottled these two field blends that are mixes of varieties that have never been planted in the region.
Oh, cool.
Um, some of them probably not at all in the US. Yeah, which was a project we started back in 2011, just tasting different different varieties that we thought might be fits in the area, and then with our nursery getting them into getting cuttings and then plants, and then a couple of years ago we got our first grapes, and then this past year we got enough that we could make 1 barrel of white and 1 barrel of red. So it was quite an afternoon of slow going, moving along, and finally getting this kind of first look at these varieties that have never been here before. So
Super cool. That's exciting.
yeah, it was quite a it at the end it was quite cool. I mean, to remember that has been going on for so long. We've been talking about it. Yeah, varieties like Petit Arvine, Zweigelt, Schiappatino,
Nice.
Offenthaler, things kind of wacky stuff. But
That's
yeah,
awesome. Well, I hope that it continues to grow.
yeah, we'll see.
Cool. So I would love for you to tell us, a bit about the background of the wineries, how they emerged, and then like how they came together.
Okay, yeah. Let's see. Well, we'll start with the older property, which is Hermann Wiemer. Hermann was a German immigrant here to the area. He first came here in the late 1960s as a student, and did a little bit of work um, over on Kuka Lake, and then he left and went back to Germany. And then a gentleman named Walter Taylor, who was running a pretty large wine company in the area, had met him or had heard about him and asked him to come back to the US and start this project called Bully Hill with him.
Hmm.
And so Herman came back and started working for Walter. And then in 1973, he purchased the property where I'm sitting now, which was an abandoned soybean property over on Seneca Lake. He was working on Kuka Lake and living on Kuka Lake, about half an hour drive from here. So this was kind of over on Seneca, which is the largest, deepest lake of the 11 Finger Lakes, and kind of the most important viticulturally. But at that time, there was very little vinifera production here, so he stuck his flag in the ground here and started putting some experimental blocks in the in the ground in 1974, and then starting in 77 and 78, he put in some pretty significant plantings of Riesling and Chardonnay, um, to start the business, kind of going in that direction. And then starting in 1980, he left his position winemaking at Bully Hill and focused all his efforts on the nursery and this business here. So the first big vintages of bottlings of Wiemer wines were in 79 and 80. And yeah, we've been kind of focusing on certainly on Riesling throughout those ensuing decades, traditional method sparkling, um, and then working into Gewürztraminer and Cabernet Franc now, and yeah, kind of dipping our toes in a lot of different aspects, all while we're keeping a very big focus on our nursery production, so grafting vines for vineyards all around the East Coast and specifically the Finger Lakes, and yeah, we have customers all over the United States now, and then also, of course, on the viticulture and focusing on the farming, which has always kind of been central to what we do. In the 1990s, mid to late 90s, Hermann purchased 2 more properties 10 miles north of us,
Hmm.
where we north of the winery, which we started planting out in 99. So that kind of was a big shift in the winery's one ability to grow different things, because there's some varieties up there that's a bit more protected site. So he was unsuccessful in growing Pinot Noir, for example, for the first 25 years down at this site because it's just too cold.
Hmm.
Takes a lot of winter damage, hard to get ripe. Moving some of those varieties like Gewürztraminer, Pinot Noir, to the Dresden sites kind of totally changed the production, and allowed consistent development of those varieties year in and year out for the most part. So that was a big shift. And then once Fred and Oscar and Marisa, the current owners, took over from Hermann in the early 2000s, we've kind of jumped up the production over a few years' time, kind of making consistent bottlings of single vineyard Rieslings and sparkling, and yeah, moving out the scope, I guess, both from farming and from a number of wines we work with, leading into the at the aforementioned Standing Stone, which we acquired in 2017, which is a site on the directly opposite of where I sit right now, across on the other side of the lake, which is, you can see it from back behind me up the hill. Oscar's house is there, and you can see Standing Stone from his house, actually.
Awesome.
Which is, it's sort of funny. We've been looking at it for a long time. But when it became the previous owners were looking to kind of step away from the business that they had built over 25 years, and yeah, the Oscar and Fred and Marisa thought it was a really special site. It's been a known site around the Finger Lakes for a long time. First planted by the Gold Seal company, which was a big sparkling producer in the area for many decades. They planted their first experimental vinifera plantings there in the mid 70s, right around the time that Hermann had put the first vines in the ground here. So it's kind of always been a known entity around the region. And then Tom and Marty were also selling some of the fruit
Hmm.
to different growers and establishing that kind of reputation as a really protected site. It's very close to the water, kind of a amphitheater style hillside vineyard. Not super steep, but very long slope kind of going down to the lake.
Hmm.
And that's allowed for very consistent Gewürztraminer production, which is really rare in this area. And working with some other varieties, certainly the most well-known and also least known in a way of which is Saperavi, which they started planting in the mid 90s. They did a little bit of planting of it, and then now we have about 7 acres of Saperavi. So we're pretty certain we have more Saperavi than anyone else in the world outside of Georgia.
Awesome.
Yeah, so now the brands are all kind of and the wines are all kind of commingled. We make them all on this side of the lake just because we
Okay.
have kind of the bigger facility here. So we bring all the fruit from Standing Stone to Wiemer, but Fred and I and the team just kind of keep all the Standing Stone wines come exclusively from that site,
Mm.
the 45 acres. And then the Wiemer wines are all from the vineyards on the west side here and a little bit, with Standing Stone involved on some of the cross varieties that we have in common.
Fantastic. Yeah, I when I first visited the Finger Lakes back in 2014, we did our little like day-long stages at different wineries, and mine was Standing
Hmm.
Stone.
Oh,
So it
really?
was fun to see the evolution from that to when we visited the tasting room last year. And
Yeah.
the consistent thing I noticed is that it was raining so hard both times I visited. So it must be a curse.
Yeah, that's funny. Well, it's interesting you say that because this year it's been very hot, mostly very dry. June was extremely dry. Several inches below average on rainfall across the area. And then July has gotten quite a bit more rain,
Hmm.
still stayed very warm. But Standing Stone, now that have, we work now we farm the 6 sites now, Standing Stone and the 3 on this side of the lake, and then a couple little ones that we've been planting over the last couple of years. Standing Stone is by far the driest.
Really?
So it's funny you say that it's been raining because our northern sites up towards the north end of the lake, Magdalena and Yosef, are super moist all the time right now. They growing like jungles. And then you go to the winery site where I am now and Standing Stone are on similar kind of the way the weather patterns end up sitting. They end up kind of getting similar rainfalls, and Standing Stone is so dry right now. It's looks totally different than it looks like it hasn't rained in like 6 months over there, even though it has certainly. But it is funny. I was just over there on Tuesday, and it's just remarkable how different it looks. There's definitely some drought stress going on over there,
Hmm.
which in the vineyard manager up in Dresden is like, we are the polar opposite. So that is funny that I can tell you it's not always raining there.
Okay, I'll take your word for it. Maybe next time.
Yeah.
Speaking of vineyards, will you tell me a little bit? You spoke already a bit about, the difference between some of the vineyards that you work with, but will you also kind of illustrate how you like to work in the vineyards?
Yeah. Yeah. I think this is a really long-standing piece of philosophy going back from Hermann. He he was very much, especially on the nursery side, but more so, he was always a viticulturalist first and foremost. Not really. I mean, he certainly has made many wines in his life, but he really was very specialized in his training on vines and certainly on nursery production. But so farming has always been very central to the winery's identity. And one of the tricky things for him, unfortunately, in those early years was just people and labor and time, and trying to maintain all of those balances, doing the 3 different pieces of the business. So he was unable to kind of do some of the things I think he had hoped to do. But starting by the kind of early 2000s, they were starting to be able to achieve some of those things from eliminating use of herbicides on all the sites. So we haven't sprayed an herbicide on any property since 2004. On the west side of the lake, Standing Stone is a little different story, but we'll get there. Um, and yeah, moving to a much more certainly labor and um, uh, I don't know how to say it, like um, mechanical is one way to say it, of weed control. So yeah, along with going with no herbicides, then you have to figure out a way to help the vines outcompete weeds and things like that, which we've worked into across all the sites. So yeah, now we're farming about 135, 140 acres with no herbicides, which is really great. And we're, over the last 5-6 years, been transitioning the HAW farm, where the home site, where the winery is, and the site we've owned the longest, into biodynamics, um, which has been a really rewarding, I mean, very challenging, but very rewarding journey. I think a lot of people in the Finger Lakes, especially, and East Coast maybe in general, it's a challenging place to grow grapes,
Hmm.
and it's a super challenging place to grow grapes on an organic level, certainly on a biodynamic level. And we felt, I think Fred and the ownership was really always is pushing and trying to see what else we can bite off, and work towards as goals, and just trying to better understand our sites and better understand what's really possible. And so the biodynamics, we started with sorry, there's a plane going overhead.
That's okay.
uh
Who's traveling these
in
days?
Yeah, it's a very small one, so someone who's probably an owner pilot, I would guess. It looks
Nice.
like a two-seating thing. Yeah, the Tace, my colleague, who's a vineyard manager and director of the vineyards, he has studied in different biodynamic estates back home in Loire and also in Alsace. He's a Frenchman. When he started here in 2014, we started talking about that, and we started with a 5-acre planting of Riesling in 2015 growing season, doing biodynamics. And then in the ensuing 5 vintages here, we've transitioned a 40-year-old Chardonnay vineyard into biodynamics. This vineyard behind me, which is a young Riesling vineyard, and then the very key kind of centerpiece of the estate for many years has been the HJW Old Block of Riesling, which was planted in 1977. So now this whole farm here is under biodynamic farming all the way, and the vines are really doing amazing. It's been,
Awesome.
you certainly see you definitely take your lumps for a couple of years, and we certainly knew that going in, but it is also still tough to do it when you're well, when you see you're losing crop, and you're seeing vines struggle. But last 2018 we had a very challenging vintage
Hmm.
from disease pressure. It was very warm, rained almost every day, all from like what seemed like July to March the next year. It was just kind of always raining, very humid, and the biodynamic blocks looked and performed the best of any blocks that we have farmed. So that was a really big indication to us that um, it can work even in these really challenging vintages. So and then the other sites, we're doing as fully sustainable agriculture as we can get, using lots of cover crops, trying to alleviate stress on the vines where we can, without the use of systemics or any kind of big blanketing pesticides. Standing Stone was farmed fully conventionally for its whole existence.
Hmm.
When we purchased the property in 2017, the first thing we did was eliminate herbicides, which had been used pretty readily there for a long time. Um, and then that's kind of started the process of getting soil health back, seeing kind of under trellis growth again,
Hmm.
which is has, it takes a few years, but now we're starting to see, and I think we're starting to have fruit that comes off of there that's really starting to showcase itself really nicely.
Hmm.
And so we're hoping, and especially in a vintage, we see it like this vintage where you have really, especially over there, really low um, rainfall and disease pressure. We're going to definitely start looking to implement some of the practices we've been looking and using here at the HAW site from a biodynamic perspective over there. I think that's really what we're hoping to do. It's a really great site for it, we think, and we just, it's a very labor is and timing is. It's not even that there's that, eventually there's less labor as the vines really start to manage themselves, but the timing of the labor is super key, obviously, if you're going to use the calendars
Hmm.
um our Vintace here, who manages this site, he's regularly here at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning to do the teas at the right time and
Oh
before
man.
it gets too warm. And so there's a bending of the humanities, humans kind of schedule to fit the philosophy, I guess, which is something you just have to get on board with.
Right.
But yeah, yeah, vintages like this are they're really promising and showcase maybe that it can be done in other places.
Very cool. Yeah, what made you choose the specific vineyards that you started working with biodynamically? Like, what made those work well? And are you planning to pursue full biodynamic certification for those vineyards?
Yeah. To the second question, I'll just answer quickly because it's an easy one. Yeah, we're pursuing Demeter certification for
Okay.
this whole site, for these 33 acres here, and off of these 33 acres, we produce a single vineyard Riesling, well, two single vineyard Rieslings, a sparkling Riesling from this site behind me, this vineyard, and then Blanc de Blanc and still wine Chardonnay off of. So there's actually 5 wines that could be potentially certified with Demeter once the farm is. We actually this year was going to be the one that we were going to do it. We have Sarah over in Oregon from the Demeter office who's been coordinating with us over the last couple of years, and then COVID obviously has
Right.
changed a lot of things, even for the biodynamic farming world. So yeah, we will be. We were hoping that 2020 was going to be the vintage that we would have certification. We'll see. We might still be able to pull that out. But yeah, the kind of, I think the home site here felt like the obvious choice. One, because of it's slightly more isolated than our other sites
Hmm.
in a way similar to Standing Stone. We just have one vineyard down the way from us, Shaw Vineyard, Steve Shaw's place. And so, whereas our sites in Dresden, Magdalena and Josef are very much um, really surrounded on all sides. It's an important grape growing area. It's a super great place to grow grapes. So um, disease pressure up there from other farmers who are maybe not interested in doing some of the things that we are has been historically a big challenge there,
Hmm.
really big challenge. We've tried organic up there in 2016 and 17, and we struggled definitely, at least in 17, with quite a lot of disease pressure. And it's just tough when you have that much vineyard area surrounding you, several hundred acres, people farming native grapes right next to your Riesling, and other varieties, just kind of the things that get passed around. It,
Hmm.
it creates some challenges. So HAW, because of its isolation, and also it's really, we have a very clear understanding of the site the site and how it works. I mean, we've someone has been farming it or living on it or both for since 1973. So we have a really good understanding of how the airflow works around the different sites, and just the general kind of where the storms come from, how much rain we get. And so we started with that young planting of Riesling that was only at the time of its biodynamic start was only 4 years old. And that just seemed like an interesting place to start because the vines had had very little um, life led, if you will, and another sort of any other way of farming. And then once we started seeing good success with that, we to a very old vineyard, the Chardonnay vineyard, and then we've kind of since meandered, I guess, west, kind of counterclockwise around the farm, to be getting all the blocks. So yeah, it just kind of made sense from that perspective, and I think also it's a little bit of maybe a homage or I think Hermann was certainly grew up with vineyards, maybe not practicing biodynamics, but certainly not kind of practicing similar growing practices without even knowing it. Growing up, his family had vineyards all over the Mosel, um, and so he certainly was involved in growing grapes pre uh, pre kind of big ag and chemical introductions to farming. So I think it's something he was always kind of interested in and wanted to get back to. So it seemed like a good place to start.
Awesome. Hopping over to the winemaking side, how would you define your winemaking style for both properties?
Yeah, I think the winemaking style is certainly trying to be very, very site driven, with Riesling as the main vehicle to do that for us. Some vintages are bottling 12 to 14 different Rieslings over, from cabinet level wines all the way through to, TBA level dessert wines. So yeah, I think we've worked into a very minimal approach when it comes to it's always a bad word, but minimal approach when it comes to what we do when the juice gets into the winery. But it's obviously, in order to get to that point, it's extremely detail oriented,
Mm-hmm.
um, picking the same site many times over the course of a harvest to capture the different nuances and ripeness levels. And then once we bring that into the winery, we just allow the site to really shine, hopefully. But yeah, there's no sulfur used on the press pad on any juice, so we're very oxidative with the juice. It's kind of, we have people who come and work with us, and it's, people get a little freaked out because we do the racking and the juice is browner than heck. But we've done that for a long time now. We know what we're getting into, and then once it's off the press, it's into settling tanks, and then just overnight settling and into fermenters. We try and really minimize our footprint on the wine in a way. I mean, obviously we can never fully do that because we're
Mm-hmm.
the ones deciding when things get bottled and not. But that's definitely the overall goal. And yeah, it's really interesting doing it across the number of varieties that we do it with, especially now with Standing Stone involved. We're working with, well over a dozen varieties, and learning how each one of those likes to be handled and fermented is quite a big puzzle in
Mm-hmm.
the end. but yeah, and then once the wines, usually we just do one filtration on them once they're through their fermentation, which is all native yeast for both wineries, which Standing Stone historically had definitely not been. We started that right away on the 2017s when we took over, and now we do that on everything over there also. Yeah, and once the wines are through alcoholic fermentation, we yeah, just filtration and the bottling and sulfur with bottling. But it certainly, site expression and ageability are very important, especially
Hmm.
on the Rieslings. It's and even things like Gewürztraminer and Chardonnay and sparklings, kind of they all get the same kind of treatment. Even our largest bottlings, like the dry Riesling, which we've been doing since the late '80s, has gets the same treatment in terms of there's actually no dry Riesling tanks in the winery. Everything is parceled out by sites, and then when we come to the summer, or late spring, we kind of start compiling dry Riesling into the different pieces based on trying to find balance in the wine and in the vintage.
Very cool. Well, I sold a lot of that dry Riesling when I worked at Terroir on the High Line, so
Yeah,
I like
yeah,
the way you
thank
do
you.
it.
Yeah, yeah. We just released the 2019, which is really stellar. We're very happy about that. It's a fun vintage. The 19s are quite nice so
Awesome.
far.
Awesome. Can't wait to try one eventually. And I have to ask before we hop off, how have you guys been dealing with everything that's gone on this year? How have you been dealing with all the circumstances that have come around due to COVID?
Yeah, yeah. Well, we've first and foremost, everyone's been healthy and safe, so that's really important because we are a little bit of we're a significant size operation now with the amount of ag. We've got a pretty large ag team, and then um, tasting room and um, office and admin, and then winemaking. So yeah, we've got a lot going on and a lot of people. So that's really been great. Everyone's families are good. It was very interesting in the beginning. I mean, the last place we were, I think, was actually in New York for the Skurnik portfolio tasting, amongst the many, hundreds of Europeans. And it was, yeah, thinking back now, it's quite amazing. I was in a bar with guys from Italy and the Loire, and we were all swapping stories about the 2019 vintage and sharing wines, and all of which seems completely unimaginable
Totally.
at the moment. But at least we came out of that okay. But yeah, we've been doing just fine. We had to kind of adjust our nursery for a little bit. We weren't sure because the grafting happens in that time in March, April, and so we pushed that out for 6 weeks or so longer than we would have, and just kind of focused on outside work,
Hmm.
which is one of the benefits of our existence here. So that was challenging. It kind of has compressed the schedule, certainly from a bottling perspective, and getting ready for the harvest to come, which is coming fast because it has been very warm.
Hmm.
So August is going to be a bit of a sprint on the bottling side because we didn't do very much in those months when we kind of weren't sure about how this, as we all of course still are not sure how this virus works, but now we know at least kind of the things to avoid. And
Right.
um, so yeah, it was challenging, but then we reopened in June from the retail side, and we've kind of changed our setup, and it's going great. I mean, we have the tasting room staff has done amazing, and I mean, all of us are masked up 9 hours a day, even in the production side. So we're trying to do our part, not screw it up. But yeah, we've kind of shifted the tasting room to more of like a restaurant setup without food, of course. But
Hmm.
table service, and everything is poured by the half glass and bottle. We don't do any real tastings, but that's opened up like a lot of people with different businesses and different events. I think it's shown a lot of possibilities of what we all can do and what people are interested in. I mean, we've
Mhm.
seen, we're able to showcase some wines that we kind of struggled to figure out how to find a place for in the past, in a tasting setting. So that part's been really cool. Certainly the biodynamic wines have benefited greatly, from that being able to be showcased a little bit more,
Mhm.
which again, it's funny. I mean, no one was preventing us from doing half glasses before. We just
Yeah.
hadn't thought of it. And now it seems like a lot of things, it's just like unimaginable that we wouldn't do that.
For sure.
uh, so yeah,
Well, I'm glad to
but
hear
we
you
definitely,
guys are adapting,
yeah,
hanging
yeah,
there.
yeah. And definitely the vines are just, marching on. The
Yeah.
vineyards are just doing their thing. So we
Well,
all
not
must
for
keep
no
pace with
one.
them. Yeah.
Or no virus, I guess.
Yeah, that's right.